virtually. Today, we are very fortunate to invite a special speaker who does commercial appraisals. One thing I think about is appraisal is probably one of the most critical elements when you purchase a properties. A lot of us, when we go and buy properties, we don't know exactly what that property is worth. So I don't know whether you guys have gone into a bidding war. Have any one of you gone into a bidding war and the property start out at 100,000, you got 200,000, 300,000. So you might have overpaid for that piece of property. Or let's say when you bid it at a certain price, $500,000, I just make it up. The bank will send an appraiser out and say, no, it's not worth that much. So how do you deal with the difference in cost? So today we have Ann Burkle here to give us some of the insights on how do you look at a properties. I know most of us are residential agents, but my experience is I do both. Actually, commercial is a little bit easier. The amount of work is pretty much the same, not that much difference, but the commission is a lot higher because you deal in a $1 million to $5 or $10 million range. So you actually get a little bit more commission out of that transaction. Okay, feel free to ask any questions. We have a small group. So if for some of you who might own rental properties or who want to buy commercial building or who want to get your CCIM, I think Ann can give you some insight because I think appraisal is very critical, especially when you go and buy property. We have no idea how much the property is worth. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little bio on Ann. Ann Burkle is a certified general real estate appraiser. Her professional career started with Secure Pacific National Bank, then Bank America. We started in the same company. I used to work for the same company, yes, not until I found
Security Pacific Bank.
Yeah, it was just coincidental. With the current iteration of her appraisal practice as a partner with West Coast Appraisal Service. West Coast Appraisal Service is a full-service real estate appraisal company that concentrates on the valuation of commercial and industrial real estate in Southern California region. In her private life, Ann donates her time as a docent at the Getty Center. Beautiful place. I love that place. And Pasadena Heritage. She's a current board member of the Philosophical Research Societies, as well as a former board members of Pasadena Heritage and EXP, the Opportunity Engine. Let's give a hands of welcome.
Since we're a small group, we can really, I would like you to ask me questions as we go along, so we don't wait until the end and then people wonder, you know, why she's saying this now. So I like the informality of a group so that everybody can get their questions answered. So please raise your hand or say, you know, look at me and all that kind of stuff, and we'll go for it. Yes, sir. Good morning.
Based on the price that seller and buyer agreeable and come up 2.7 something to make it satisfied to both seller and buyer. Indeed, won't be able to close the escrow.
I know where you're going with this. An appraisal is an opinion of value, and everybody has an opinion. You could have 5 appraisers here. You could give them all the same comps, and you're going to end up with 5 different answers. And the reason for that really is unknown. It's how they see the property. It's what the appraiser values in the property. An appraiser dissects all the characteristics surrounding that property that may lead to value. Some appraisers, you know, a pending sale in a very irregular market like we've been experiencing for the past 4 years. Ever since COVID started, the market got wonky. And a current sale is almost like a benchmark. So maybe the appraiser was trying to do that. I don't know. I can't speak for the appraiser's opinion. I could look at it and come in $500,000 less or $500,000 more. I don't know. It really depends on how they've analyzed it and all that. And that is a problem with commercial appraisal, is that there is no standard. There just is no standard. There's a standard in presentation, there's a standard in processes, but not in terms of, but there's no standard when it comes to analysis. Yes, ma'am.
One moment, I need a you ask question here because recording cannot listen your voice. Come here to ask a question, please. Okay. One moment. You need to use microphone. Recording cannot receive your voice, even you speak so loud.
Good morning. My question is, for the commercial property, most of the time, you have to put 50% down payment to qualify to get the mortgage loan from the bank. My question is, if we hire you to get appraisal for my property, and then when you apply for the loan from the mortgage company, they will have theirs appraisal to give you the price for the commercial property. And usually there's a two different price. And what should we do?
The law is for any federally related transaction, the lender has to hire the appraiser. So you are wasting money getting an appraisal ahead of time, unless you want a broker's opinion of value or something like that. But even that is a waste of time because while this isn't an appraisal is about 100 pages. And then there's amendments or an addenda. And you're wasting your money if you get one before you've secured your lender. And with regard to a 50% down, that's not necessarily true. Commercial loans for commercial banks typically start at 70% down. 50% would be land, but every lender right now does not want to lend. There's, like I said, and I'll repeat this several times, there's been a significant slowdown in commercial appraising because of the lenders. And the reason for it is that it's got everything to do with the cost of funds rate that our president keeps wanting to go down really low so that interest rates go low. Not necessarily a good thing, maybe. And we'll discuss why a little later on. But the way the commercial lender looks at it is that the appraiser goes out and appraises the property and gives them a laundry list of everything that the appraiser saw, did, and then we also have to analyze if there's any risks and anything like that. And then the lender, the appraisal is a significant part, but also the creditworthiness of your tenant, the type of real estate. If it's special purpose, there's more risk involved as opposed to it just being a typical retail unit on, let's say, Colorado Boulevard in Pasadena. That's a pretty safe loan, secure loan, because it's an area that it has a constant pool of customers coming in, so the risk is mitigated. But we don't always know those things as the appraiser, and it really technically should not change our point of view of the appraisal value. What the lender opts to do is outside of our hands. But what the lender wants us to do is essentially be their eyes and ears, because when a lender makes a loan, they're essentially buying that property. Because if you can't pay your debt service or your mortgage, lender takes the property, and now what do they do with it? If we substantially overappraise it, then they're sitting there with a non-performing asset. If we underappraise it, then they more than likely won't be able to get the amount of money they need out of it. We have to come to what's called market value, and that's willing buyer and seller. And I always forget what it is. I have to look usually in an appraisal report and say, oh yeah. And it has to be on the market for a reasonable period of time, has to have brokers on either side, and cash in its equivalent. And I forget the fifth one, I'm sorry. And so that's our bench point in any kind of an appraisal. Am I making sense?
Let me say something. I think it is helpful for Anne to start her presentation first. Maybe hold the question, because some of the questions you want to ask might be covered in the presentation. We have a little bit time. So let her run through her routine. And then if there's things that holds you up, write it down. At the end, we'll run into Q&A. Is that okay, Anne?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be better, because otherwise question can come from all directions. It will interfere with her presentation. Thank you.
Okay, this is the interactive part. This is a work of art, and it's at the Getty Center. And my question to you is, what does it look like to you? Okay, satellite antenna. Anything else? Sail or a fan? Anything else? An arc? Absolutely. Anything else? Finished construction? Artists wouldn't like that, but you know something? It works. Oftentimes when I ask people this when I'm at the Getty, they'll say a womb. I don't get that one. They'll say a highlight racket. They'll say a butterfly wing. What if I told you it's a face? Face, F-A-C-E. Yeah. And if it's a face, what direction is the nose pointing? It's contemporary work of art by an artist named Martin Purier. And what he is trying to do is take a modern look to Renaissance portraiture. Now, the most famous Renaissance portrait out there is the Mona Lisa. So in your mind's eye, picture the Mona Lisa. And the next question is she looking at you or is she looking to the side? About the Mona Lisa, is she looking directly at you or is her head tilted? Absolutely tilted. Renaissance portraiture is always some form of a profile. And the other calling card for Renaissance portraiture is it always has detailed landscaping in the background. This one would be the Santa Monica Mountains, and that white object in the, I think, right-hand side is Mount St. Mary's. This is called That Profile by Martin Purier. Now, the reason why this is important is because it's art. And what we just did is the very first thing that an appraiser does, and that is identify the problem. Problem is not a pejorative in appraisal. Problem just means answer the question. And so I submit to you that appraisal is not a science. It's actually an art. You have to be extremely creative. You have to be you have to have strong researching skills, and you have to kind of understand how to create an argument that anybody, including a banker, would understand. And most people don't, they wonder, why the hell is she doing this? And it's because it's kind of a cool way for everybody to get out of the preconceived notions in their brain and open up to the possibilities. Okay, an appraisal is an opinion of value. And like I said before, 5 appraisers all have the same comps. You'll get 5 different answers. And it's all based on how the appraiser, their experience level, and how they look at. Okay, identifying the problem is something that you all need to really understand because it would benefit you to look at commercial property the same way. And so that means you have to classify the real estate. And this is probably the hardest thing out there because what I notice about real estate agents is they look at potential. And the potential is important because that's how you can open up the eyes of your potential buyer. But the appraiser looks at it from the highest and best use standard. We look at it as what will create enough money to give the highest amount of return to the land. And we'll talk about that a little later on. And so the first thing we look at is zoning. And that is extremely difficult right now because Governor Newsom is trying to incentivize developers to put in housing because we have the housing crisis. So a lot of times commercial zoning is no longer confined to just commercial properties. You can do apartments on them in certain cities, even industrial. And so finding out your zoning and finding out what you can build is really quite, the land use is what you can build is really quite important. And then the next thing you do is, are there alternative uses? For instance, if you're appraising a contractor storage yard, and a contractor storage yard is industrial land, maybe just for example, it would be an acre of land, but it only has a 600 square foot building on it, you automatically say it's worth land value. But guess what? In order to have that contractor storage yard, you have to have a conditional use permit. And that conditional use permit is worth a lot of money to somebody who needs a yard to park their cars or park their equipment or something like that. So when you start layering the use of the site, your opinions kind of turn and kind of change. But then it could be a contractor storage yard in the middle of a subdivision. Is having equipment stacked on an acre lot in the middle of a subdivision the highest and best use? Probably not. So those are things that the appraiser has to consider. So what you're seeing is not always what it is. And then ascertain rights. I cannot tell you how important this is. Property rights are fee simple, leased fee, leasehold. Fee simple is an owner user or something that does not have a lease. I interpret that as also if you've got a multi-tenant property, but all your tenants are month to month. I look at that as fee simple. Some appraisers don't, but I do because you can get that tenant out of there immediately. And there's a reason why fee simple that's a good thing for fee simple. The second one is leased fee. Leased fee is when there's a lease involved, a term lease. And then leasehold, we won't even go there because it's pretty specialized and you don't need to know that right now. Now, with regard to valuing, if I've got an owner user property, I need owner user sales. If I've got a leased fee property, I need leased sales. However, in terms of determining what valuation technique is the most important are opposite. Owner user tends to be, isn't really necessarily interested in the income aspect. They don't care how much they're going to rent it out or anything like that because it's going to be where they have their business. So consequently, the sales comparison approach drives value. Whereas in leased fee, the risk is, what if a tenant leaves? You've got tenants and all that kind of stuff. So then the income approach drives that value. Owner user, typically right now, this is a rule, not a hard and cast rule of thumb because the market is shifting. But historically, an owner user property will appraise out higher than the identical property that has a lease on it. And it's got everything to do with risk. There's a risk for that tenant leaving, and then you've got a vacant property. Whereas owner user, they're not going to leave. Does that all make sense? Well, we'll use, yeah, for owner user and versus a leased fee or an investment property, do you appraise them differently? No, you don't appraise them differently. You still do an income approach and you do still do a sales comparison approach. But where I weigh my my approaches as an owner user, I will weigh the sales comparison approach, and on an investor property, I will weigh the income approach. We'll talk about those. I identify unique characteristics. I just appraised an avocado ranch in Fillmore that had no water. He was bootlegging the water from a property about a quarter of a mile away. And he was on a hill and it was bedrock. There was no water and no way for water to get there. What's it worth? Your real estate agents? Probably zero. But that's a unique characteristic. And so you have to identify those and you have to consider how that's going to impact value and reflect that in your appraisal. And then determine the most applicable valuation method is what we just discussed regarding leased fee and fee simple. So I'm the appraiser, what do I need? To appraise an income producing property, I need, if it's leased, I need a rent roll. And I've got samples of rent rolls here, and I can give them out to you if you would like to see them. I need to know 1 to 3 years operating history. Oftentimes I'm given IRS forms submissions. I can work with that, but that's not ideal because guess what? People lie to the IRS. And so sometimes it doesn't work to your benefit. So I also have a sample of a income and expense Excel that you can look at and see what we look for. I like getting title policies, but I understand they're expensive, and typically a lender will get those, but not always in time for the appraiser. I need to have a, oops, I think I did this. I don't pay attention to what I do. Access to the property. I have to get in and see the property. And believe it or not, a lot of clients will say, well, why do you have to see the property? Why do you have to go inside? Because I do. I have to measure. And then the rent roll we discussed. The leases are really, really good to have, but if I have a rent roll, I can get out of the leases. 1 to 3 years expense history. Do I have any others? You know, a lot of times we appraise a property where the client or the buyer wants to turn it into something else. And right now, the hot topic is buying an old office or an old retail building, and then a doctor buying it and changing it to medical office. And so that we're often asked to do a prospective market value. And that just says, okay, and we also do what's called a market value as is, which is the value of the property as it exists. The prospective would take into consideration all the changes being made. Oftentimes, I don't get a good list of construction costs. They'll give me a few of the items, but they don't give me soft costs or indirect costs, which would be permits. I don't get landscaping, which I'm sure they're going to be doing since I know that their parking lot is all torn up. And then the other side of the coin is a developer may believe that if they inflate the costs, they're going to get a higher value. And that doesn't happen. I have to cost everything out and I have to come into what I can support with costs. And if the developer says it's going to cost 300,000 and I come in 250,000, then there's 50,000 that the bank will have put into an impound account to cover costs if there's overruns. And the same thing happens if you lowball your costs, thinking if they're lower, they'll see I'm really groovy and efficient, and I'll get the loan. And if you're low as opposed to me being high, they'll have you put that in an impound account as well. Because what the lender is concerned is that if you go BK while you're doing your construction, they are buying the property essentially, and now they're in the position where they have to complete the construction. And so they want to make sure that there's enough of a buffer and everything is disclosed as best as they can so they can make the appropriate decision if they fear that that's an issue. And then purchase agreements. I have to have I have to ask for leases. I will not do an appraisal unless I have at least a rent roll. If I don't have income and expenses, I can do what's called market expenses or economic expenses, and these books here help me with that. But if I do not have escrow instructions, I will not do an appraisal. And you'd be surprised how many people don't want to release escrow instructions. By law, if it's a sale, I have to discuss the sale. So consequently, I need the escrow instructions. By law, I am supposed to support expenses. They don't say I have to get actual expenses. They say I have to talk about, by law, I have to talk about leases or the income that's being collected. So I need leases or a rent roll, preferably both. And a lot of people don't realize that it's the law that's telling me I need this. And then supplemental information. That's market data. How many of you have had a residential appraiser not accept your sale comparables that you want to share with them? Have you experienced that? You know, as a commercial appraiser, I look at them and I go, huh? And I know that the whole notion is we cannot be persuaded, or we have to determine market value and it has to be our independent, and we have to retain independence. But if you're giving me comps, I'm looking at them and I'm saying, okay, now I can understand how they priced the property. Now, what is the market really saying? You're giving me information that can help me understand the who, what, when, where's, and whys. But you're not telling me to come in with value. If you did that, that's illegal, by the way. Now, with regard to commercial properties, it is difficult to get comparable rents. It is difficult to get comparable sales. It's difficult to get them confirmed because we have to confirm everything we use. And so if you're going to give me verifiable information, I'm definitely going to look at it. Doesn't mean I'm going to use it. And in a few minutes, we'll talk about why. But it helps frame what the market is doing. So if you're willing to share market data, and most appraisers will ask you, have you done any sales in the area or have you done any leases? If you want to share, it's welcomed. If you don't want to, that's your prerogative. But usually a commercial appraiser will ask for that. And I'm gobsmacked about a residential appraiser not accepting it, because I know MLSs are very complete, but you never know if something doesn't show up on the market, and that might just be the one that will corroborate a value or kill a value. It does that as well. Okay, that's a rent roll. And I've got whoops, sorry, as I go away from the microphone, I have copies of the rent roll here. Everything that's shaded in yellow is what I need. I need to know the unit number. I need to know the tenant. I need to know what the lease or the property owner says the square footage is. I may not adopt it because I'm measuring it as well. I need to know when the lease started and when it expires. I need to know the term of the lease, the classification of lease, whether it's triple net, modified gross, full service gross. And I'm not going to go into that now. We can do that at another time. And then I also need to know what the rent is, the rent today, not the first year rent in your lease, the rent that they're paying today. And I need to know the common area maintenance charge, the CAM. The CAM is the most difficult thing for an appraiser to get out of a real estate agent. I have no idea why, but that is does everybody know what a CAM is? A common area maintenance? Yeah. On a triple net rent, the landlord is responsible for payment of the management fee, reserves, and an expense called expense while vacant. And it's another reserve that covers the property for times of vacancy. But a triple net tenant is responsible for paying a pro rata share of all the other expenses. So they pay for the pro rata share of the taxes, of the insurance, of certain items of maintenance, of rubbish oftentimes. And what happens is, because it's pro rata, that implies that it's multi-tenant. And so if there's 4 tenants, each tenant is responsible for 25% of those costs. And so it's an additive to your rent. And that's income that you're not considering in the appraisal if you don't have the information, and then you're going to end up with a lower value. So that's why it's critical. But a lot of times, I call them relationship managers, where really nice people have a 6-unit retail built project, and they really like their tenants and they want to keep their tenants. So they may have the legal right to collect a common area maintenance fee, but in reality, they may not do it because they want to retain their tenant. And that's also seen in raising rents from year to year. There might be a 3% clause in the lease that says rent goes up 3%, but a landlord oftentimes will not, who's a relationship manager, will not impose that because he wants to keep his tenant. If the bank forecloses, that lease is their agreement, and the bank is going to go in and they're going to start collecting these things. And so it's a double-edged sword. I would probably be a relationship manager and say, oh, it's okay, you don't have to pay me that, I'll cover it. But I also am making a stupid business decision. But the bank will come in and say, look, you have to pay me this, and that may make it too expensive for that tenant to stay there. Or does it make sense? Okay. And so that's a rent roll. And this is just an Excel file. It's what we do. Everybody does it a little differently, but those are the critical pieces. The things that are in the white columns, those are things that I can determine, so you don't have to go through the brain damage. Now, the next one is an expense guideline, an expense summary, and it's stuck. Uh-oh, there we go. I'm sorry, you almost heard the appraiser use her favorite word. It's hard to see from this venue, but over on the left-hand side, the top part is income. The bottom part are all the real estate expenses. And I emphasize real estate. I don't care if you're paying your daughter $5,000 a month just as a tax write-off, that doesn't work for me. But if you have security on site, I care about that cost. Anything that has to do with the real estate are the expenses we deal with. And the appraiser will go through and vet it. They'll figure out, is this real or is this not? The first three columns are from these publications. These are Penner expense guides. There's one for retail, one for multifamily, one for industrial, and one for medical and regular office. And it comes out every 2 years. And what Mr. Penner does is he surveys properties and gets hard costs and then shows the surveys. That's in the left hand. The part that's all yellow, those are 3 years of operating histories provided by a property owner. I do have copies up here of it, and you can see how crazy they are from year to year. And then the last column is what I concluded for my valuation. And it's influenced by all of those things there. And I think I lied. The first two comps on the yellow are expense comps, where I used other properties' expenses as a comparable. And then the last one is year-to-date 2025, but I annualized it. So you can see how things are very variable. I don't suggest that you do this for your client. I just suggest that you have your client list all their expenses and they submit that. This is just how the appraiser uses it. Now it's 11:36 and I'm going to go through this really, really fast, so pay attention. How to choose market data. I cannot tell you how many times I have a street-oriented retail building that used to be that's a clothing boutique. I appraise it for, I'm just picking numbers, $100 a foot. But the property owner is sure it's worth $250 a foot. So that property owner will contact you and say, give me comps. And you can always, always, always challenge the appraisal and submit comps and say, why didn't they use these? I've got really good responses. McDonald's is not a street-oriented retail. A medical office is not a street-oriented retail. And because those would show high rents. But on the flip side, a dog washing facility more than likely would be renting out lower than a boutique because of location, because of parking. They don't really need parking unless the dogs learn how to drive a car. So I would reject that, saying that doesn't help the argument. But again, if you know your market and you farm it, you know what everything's leasing out for. And what we need are verifiable comps. So if you say, well, you missed this comp and the comp next door, and you missed a comp 3 doors down, and you provide me somebody whom I can verify it with and what you think at least for, then I'll go in and I'll revise my appraisal report if I'm wrong. Same goes for sales. If I missed a sale, I'll go back and I'll change things. Some appraisers, I don't know where they drank the Kool-Aid, but they kind of think they're God. And how dare you say I'm wrong? I would submit that that's probably not a good appraiser, because real estate is not static. It can change in a day, either up or either down. You follow the stock market and you know the crazy things going on there. Well, real estate's an alternative investment. So if the stock market crashes and you want to preserve your wealth, a lot of times they'll start buying real estate. And once they start buying real estate, they need it, they want it, they got to get it invested quickly. A buyer may opt to buy it at a higher rate above list price. I was looking for a little house in Pasadena to rent because I'm a real estate appraiser who does not own real estate. And I love this little house, and they were asking $39.50 for it. No, I'm sorry, they were asking 37 for it, but there ended up being a bidding war, which I'm sure you're all aware of. And I ended up paying $39.50 for it. But I'm very happy in my little house and it does everything I need to do. And 5 years later, I don't remember that I overpaid. So there's always motivations of an individual, of a buyer or a tenant that the appraiser doesn't always become aware of. But that is how markets start to shift. With regard to my little PowerPoint presentation, I kept it really simple because there are some important things to talk about, and that is the economic environment right now. I don't know if you know this, but Los Angeles County is the largest industrial county in the nation. The state of California is the 4th largest economy in the world. Ports of Long Beach and Port of Los Angeles combined is the largest commercial port in the world. We've got also very expensive real estate. People are being priced out. Ever since COVID, the whole nature of commercial shopping, office needs, even apartment needs or multifamily needs have shifted. And so we're in this chasm where we just don't know what to do anymore. There are not a lot of sales. There are fewer rents. The rental market is starting to pick up, and actually the sale market a little bit, but not like it was. In the city of Los Angeles, the ULI tax, the mansion tax, are you familiar with that? Anything over $5,150,000 is taxed 4%, and anything over 10 million is taxed 5.5%. And when people voted on it, because it was voted by mandate of the voters, calling it a mansion tax implied it was houses over those prices, and it wasn't. It's all real estate. And as of April 2023, when it was imposed, real estate transactions in the city of Los Angeles died. Commercial real estate attractions, because $5 million is not a lot of money for a commercial property in Los Angeles. And everything died. It went from maybe 100 sales a month to maybe 10 a month. And so for the past 3 years for appraisers, it's been very, very slow. All summer, it started to pick up, and we're slammed right now, but we've got the tariffs to consider. We have the, pricing is going up irrespective of what some say and all that kind of stuff. And we really don't know if it's going to be sustained. Now, the other thing is, and if I'm repeating this, I'm sorry, but I live this day to day, so I never know when I talk about it. But banks, a commercial loan is amortized for a 25 or 30-year period of time, a traditional commercial loan. A traditional down payment is 30%, but if it's land, it's going to be 50% because there's risk involved. And typically there's the interest rate is pretty typical, but it's springboarded off of the cost of funds rate. And the other thing a bank is supposed to do is every either 5 or 7 or 10-year point, a commercial property has got to be reappraised because the fluctuation in commercial values are quicker than a house. And banks have not been doing that, and the feds have not been imposing that. And so I'm sharing this with you because as a real estate agent, you have opportunities coming up because there's going to be a lot of foreclosures. We've spoken with our lender clients, and that's basically what they've said. The banks have decided not to lend unless it's a longtime client or whether or not the prospective customer has got savings they can bring over to their bank. There's got to be some reason for them to do a loan right now. And so that also has contributed to how slow it is. And once we have to start appraising the bad paper, it's going to be very, very busy again, but that means it's busy for you as well. Now, foreclosures are tricky because there's a stigma involved. And people don't always take care of their properties, just like with houses, if they're approaching foreclosure. They don't always take care of them. So there's things like that you have to consider. But basically, if you consider the expanse of the developed area of Los Angeles, which includes of Los Angeles County, there's not a lot of land to build anything. So a foreclosure becomes a very viable alternative. And foreclosures don't necessarily go for less than what the market says. Oftentimes they'll go for market or a little higher because banks are not in the business of losing money. So with that said, with as bad as it has been, it will get better. We just don't know when. And then we also know that, it seems like the cost of funds rate will go down 25 to 50 basis points in September. We'll see. I'm old enough to know that, and I'm really old. So I'm old enough to remember when we had inflation during the late 70s and we had all the gas wars and things like that. And the market doesn't turn immediately. There's like a 3-year lag, but we may be in that 3-year lag right now. And that all started because of COVID, as we all know. So did I hit points that help you? Because commercial appraising, once you do it for a long period of time, it can be very formulaic once you get all your data. You know how to do your income approach, you know how to do your sales comparison approach, you know how to come up with value. The trick in a commercial appraising is how far do you push it, either up or down or in the middle? Because it's an opinion, you don't want to average, but what do? We average. And you don't want to put the lender in a scary position, but you also, and scary is a technical word, by the way, but you also don't want to step on the buyer's point of view on that property either. And so I'm never an advocate, except for I'm an advocate for the right value. But I am conscientious of the motivations of both the lender, the buyer, and the seller. And that's what an appraiser needs to be, is aware of those kind of things. And they don't always do it. And I'm very sorry if you've encountered rotten appraisers. Now that it's on tape and the whole world can hear it, I said it, because there are some rotten appraisers. Some people think I'm a rotten appraiser, but that's that. Any questions? We've got 13 minutes and I'll stay later if we need it. And you have to come, okay, cool.
No, I just had that question about vacancy rates. How do you determine that in today?
I do it several ways. One is right here, CB Richard Ellis will quarterly analyze markets, but it's not always consistent. Like I'm working off of first quarter retail. They didn't do a second quarter retail, but they did a second quarter office. And any properties over 20,000 square feet, they inventory. So that's one way that I get it. Another one is this, Price Waterhouse. This is more national than it is local, but they do have local Los Angeles retail, Los Angeles industrial, Los Angeles. I didn't see apartment, but I did see office. And also, if you're doing a cash flow, which I hope to God you never have to do, they're not hard. It's a web and you kind of can get caught up in the weeds. This has all your assumptions. Every quarter they interview their investors. And so we get that there. And then the other thing you can do, so I take all my rent comps, and on my rent comp page, it's a matrix. I will have the square footage of the building, the total square footage, the vacancy, which you get when you confirm the sale. And then I put down the size of my subject building. Then I will add up all the gross square footages and all the vacancy, and I can figure out vacancy that way. But I present 3 arguments for vacancy. Now, it's also vacancy and collection loss. So the vacancy might be 4%. And you never really, and it's in, I'm sorry, vacancy is in perpetuity, meaning you're looking at it today, but you have to consider what it'll be like 7 years down the road. And so so if you think the market is recovering and everything says it's 10%, I may come in at 7.5% because things are recovering. So that one number is not static. There's reasons for me to buoy imbalance between them. But I also have to throw in what's called collection loss. And it's typical in the industry, but it's really the genesis as a lender. If the property goes vacant or if a unit goes vacant, who's going to pay the taxes, insurance, maintenance, and all those things? And that's what they call the collection loss. And so that's a reserve to cover those things, but they don't put it in the income approach directly. They envelop it in the vacancy rate. Does that give you tools? Okay. Yeah. And you can also do broker interviews. Because you're the specialist, I'm the generalist. You theoretically know your market. So what's vacancy been like? Well, it's been pretty rough, around 10%, but it's starting to ease up. That's a legitimate source, and I would use it if I ask that question. But usually with a real estate agent, I only get 3 questions, and that's not a priority one for me since I have backup sources.
Question.
Oh, thank you for taking my question. I understand that most of the lenders require the comps to be within 6 months, sold and closed. What if can't find anything that's within 6 months? What if it's 9 months? Will the lender accept it?
They call it a time adjustment, and you go back as far as you need to go. But if you're cherry picking comps where they're higher 2 years ago and you're ignoring comps from then, that's not a good practice. They'll catch you on that. But I go back to January 2024. That's how slim the sale pool is.
So like generally speaking, within 12 months or?
It's not residential. You have a lot more wiggle room and latitude. Residential, it used to be 6 months. I don't appraise houses anymore, so I don't always know the Fannie Mae rules. But with regard to commercial, I can go back a couple years if that's all I've got. Let's say I'm appraising that McDonald's.
Mm-hmm.
I would only use fast food, and I would only use named fast food. So I'd use Taco Bell, Jack in the Box, but I want a McDonald's sale in there. And if the last McDonald's sale I can find is 2 years ago, I use it. But I also can do what's called analytics through CoStar, and I've got one over there where I can just go in and say for that expanse of time, they'll give me a graph and show, and it'll tell me based on all their comps, whether or not property values for that McDonald's from January 2024 has gone up or down over that expanse of time. Then that informs me a little bit better, and I can make a time adjustment.
Okay, so the economy trend, it does help. Okay.
Mhm.
Basically, for 6 months, this is usually for residential, right? For commercial, you have more leeway on this.
I've seen commercial appraiser use comps that are 5 years old.
What
If-
if you can't find anything?
That's when you go
Is
back
there
5
any
years.
alternatives?
Yeah, instead of just looking in LA County, Ventura County, Orange County, San Bernardino, and Riverside County, if you can't find any comps in there, I look through the whole state. Because guess what? All you got to do for location adjustment is figure out what your underlying land value is. And if I'm taking a comp out of Sacramento and I don't really know the area that well, I will comp out the land. And I get a kind of I get a feeling for what land value is. I know what land value is here. So I can kind of, through that, there's an iteration I can do to gain an adjustment. The other one is rents. If something is renting for $2.50 a square foot a month, a triple net here, and I'm in Sacramento, and that same property is at $1.75, that 75 cents helps me with location.
So for commercial, you don't confine to the regulations of Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac?
No, not at
Oh,
all.
okay, okay.
But I will tell you, every job I do is reviewed, And it's like a teacher going through a 100-page report and coming back and saying your syntax sucks and that you have to do this and you have to do that. And then sometimes they'll ask, why did you use a 2-year-old comp? So if I was proactive, I would have had that answer in my report. But
Gotcha.
sometimes in a 100-page report, you kind of sort of forget. And so when they ask me that, then I'll augment the appraisal telling them why I
Okay.
did that.
So for residential, it's a different picture, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Also, one thing I forgot to do was apartments. Two to 4 units. What is the difference between a 2 and 4 unit apartment building and a 5 to 15 unit apartment building? Do you know what the difference is? The loan. The loan for a 2 to 4 is more like a residential loan. Once you get into 5 to 15 units, it's a commercial loan. Now, what about 5 to 15 units versus 16 plus? What's the difference? What's different about the manager? On-site manager, so that's an additional expense. So when you have apartments, and I interviewed some of you when you walked in, and that was your interest. When you have a 2 to 4 unit, you have to do 2 to 4 units. 5 to 15, you have to do 5 to 15. 16 plus, you stick in those categories. If you have a 15 unit and you can't find anything, but there's 3 16 units that happened right up the street, then you adjust for management. Correct. I would do a certified residential appraiser, not a general residential appraiser, because they've been schooled more in how to handle difficult properties. And sometimes 2 to 4s are really hard. Well, your property owner, the client of the bank, has got the right to ask the appraiser, are you familiar with how to appraise 2 to 4 units? Are you familiar to appraise a green and green? Are you familiar to appraise about appraising a Neutra? Something that's special. And if they can't satisfy them, that customer has a right to go back to the AMC or go back to the lender and say, I don't approve this person. It doesn't mean you're cherry picking your appraiser, you're finding the person who's most qualified. And a lot of times AMCs don't know that. They're more money oriented. They want the lowest fee. And that is not necessarily your best appraiser.
Hi, and thank you. I have a question. So, what did you see the trend of the value, commercial property value?
Every asset is different. Right now, office and retail is struggling. If you are a restaurant, there's restaurant closures, named restaurants, really schwanky. They're closing right and left. But it's kind of funny. They're releasing quickly. I would say maybe a couple months on the market and they're releasing. But I don't know if the durability of income's there. They're just getting a tenant in there. I predict that apartment buildings are going to be in a world of hurt. And the reason for that is they were selling on cap rates 2 to 4%. That's extremely low. And those cap rates are up to 5 right now. And so right now you've got a chasm in value. And so if you do work for Chase, JP Morgan Chase is the largest apartment lender in the nation. What I don't know is whether or not they sell their portfolios to investors. But those, I think, are the riskiest right now. Offices, I don't know if this is true, but I was told by a developer that an office building under, it's either 15 or 17 floors can be converted to apartment. Then anything taller than that, those upper floors, they can't convert to apartment or condo. And so that is, everybody thinks that that's a likely thing to do with the vacant offices. The problem is it is extremely expensive to modify an office building to meet housing standards. And so where it's been done successfully is downtown LA, when a developer named Gilmore started buying all the brick buildings and the poured-in-place concrete buildings on Spring Street in the old part. And it took them about 10 years, but that changed that whole a complexion of downtown LA, which allowed for the arts district, which allowed for South Park to go up. So we're in an opportunity. I look at it as an opportunity where urban renewal can really be regenerated, but you're going to need a lot of money and some really creative people to be able to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I have pretty much the same question. Talking about foreclosure and the regular property in the future, such as hotel, even the restaurant, once vacant, it's just completely vacant. Once the lease is 100%. So we're talking about medical, apartment, office, the hotel, restaurant. What's in your view, which one's more challenge and which one is still stable increase? Thank you.
In Los Angeles County, I would say industrial is as safe as an investment can be. It's still a little wonky because, again, with the tariffs, we don't know whether or not it's going to affect the port and the import and exporting that comes in. Logistics in LA County is a huge industry. And if the ports slow down, the logistics industry slows down. And then, there's a lot of things that follow. But still, they've been able to retain relatively reasonable cap rates, and their rents are going down, but not substantially. Office and retail, I think, are the greatest risk. Some mixed use is actually a good way to mitigate an investment where you've got retail on the first floor and apartments on the second floor because you're spreading your risk. We know that we need housing, so that apartment will be leased. The first floor, you may have a difficult time keeping your tenants, but maybe not. That's the thing right now. We're either turning the corner or it's going to go deeper down. I hope that it turns the corner. I am amazed at some of the rents I'm seeing. I just did something in Burbank, and a little sushi restaurant and a convenience center or a little strip shopping center, $6 a foot for rent. I'm like, that's for a mom and pop, that's high. But I found comps to support it. So I'm kind of sort of thinking things might be turning a little bit. Another thing that's impacting Los Angeles specifically is the entertainment industry is challenged right now. Of course, we read the newspaper, LA Business Journal, and a lot of the production is going out of the country or in other states. But it's not just that; it's the technicians who are here. It's just not, people aren't going to movie theaters like they used to. They're waiting for Netflix to get it and all that kind of stuff. So the whole nature of what the consumer is doing is really impacting real estate, and that's just change. Because real estate is changes all the time. Yes, ma'am.
Go down.
Yeah. Well, this is my contention as an appraiser and as somebody who rents, is they'll build, developers will come in and build a huge apartment building. Let's say it has 100 units, but they negotiate for only 5 of those units to be low income. So how are you meeting the needs of housing? And then to get low income housing, you have to have federal funding. And we all know what's happening to federal funding. So we're kind of in this, we don't know what's going to happen, but supply and demand always bears out. And if you don't have the supply, the demand is going to, and demand is there, the pricing is going to increase. Pricing increases, then theoretically the value of the property does. Where the risk is 4 to 5 years down the line when you're either forced to refinance, or if the market goes down, then you're going to have to reflect that and be fluid. But that's the risk of commercial real estate.
There's a question actually, so I want to know the solutions actually from the tenant side that concerning regarding the triple net common area charges. I don't know the lease agreement, how it says, but is the tenants right now currently got a notice from the landlord said that the common area charges is increased 3 times. So I said, what's the solution? Probably try to negotiate to escalating clause. Would that be something, the provisions, some of the lease agreement that you probably can see before that can be negotiated?
Some leases have caps on CAM charges, but where it's sticky is property taxes are reassessed at sale. So if you've had a long-term owner who put these people in as tenants, and then he sells the property, property taxes could quadruple, and that's passed through to the tenant. So the tenants can ask for an audit, but that would require an attorney to get that for them to act in their benefit. That's probably the best thing to do, but property owners should be transparent. And another area where there's a gap is maintenance, because some of the maintenance items might not be able to be passed through. So there's a lot of, you really have to read your lease and interpret it, and that requires an attorney.
Thank you very much for your time. I think we have learned quite a bit from Anne. Let's give her a welcome. And thank you for her time spent here. Okay. And on behalf of West and Gable Valley Association of Realtors and Education Committee. Okay, right here. Okay. We want to present her a certificate.
Does this mean I'm smart?
You're smarter than me and all of us, because we don't know anything about commercial